Welcome to The Other Worlds, where we talk to authors of fantasy, supernatural, and paranormal stories. Let's open the portal and meet our guest. Hello, my name is Sandra Tan, and I am joined today by Donyae Coles. Donyae is an author, an artist. She has her debut novel, Midnight Rooms, out now in hardcover and on June 11th, if my memory is correct, in paperback. And
It's, I think, June 10th.
the 10th?
I
Okay.
think so.
Okay.
June 10th.
Coming out June 10th in paperback. And Midnight Rooms has been nominated for a Stoker Award for Best Debut Novel. She's got more novels to come soon and joins us today to talk about Midnight Rooms, writing, and more. Welcome, Donyae.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on today.
I've been looking forward to chatting with you. Ever since we got the news about the nomination. That's really exciting for a debut novel. How does that make you feel?
It feels great. I am so surprised. I'm not surprised by the people I'm sharing category with, right? Like, I saw the list and I was like, what's my name doing there? That's weird. Um, but, it feels like really wonderful to be honored in such a way. Like, it is not just a thing you say to say it's an honor just to be nominated. It really is.
No, it's fantastic. So I wanted to ask you because obviously I know you. This is something that my podcast listeners may or may not know that. And so I am keenly aware of the fact that you genuinely have, well, probably hundreds, but definitely dozens of story ideas percolating in your brain at any given moment. You have like so many things, that so many ideas that you have in your files and your notes. And so I was kind of wondering how it was that Orabella's story emerged to become your debut.
Actually, I was kind of surprised that that ended up being my horror debut, quite honestly. And I think what happened mostly at that particular point in history. So when I started actually working on the book, I think it was like 2019. When I actually sat down and like opened the first Word file and said, okay, I'm going to write this thing now. And at that point in time, for whatever reasons, I thought that I was going to be a romance author, right? Like, I thought that that's the way I was going to become published. And I wanted to write a gothic romance because I really like them, and there weren't many at this time. It's 2019, y'all. This is pre Mexican Gothic. That wasn't out yet. So I really love that aesthetic. So I had started to sit down and write this book, and it seemed like something at that point in time that I could get through. And my baby was still pretty young. Like, he was like 4 going on 5. So he was like right there at that cusp. So it was like, all right, I can get into this. And then I started to publish horror at that time. That's when, some of my earlier short stories were coming out. And I got to like chapter 10 of this book, and I was like, I think I'm going to have to kill this guy. like, um, but it was really weird to me because this was a gothic, and the stories I was getting published were all like cosmic horror. So it felt really weird when it was like time, when I was getting the call, to be like, hey, I've got this gothic thing. And then my agent, Lane Haymont, was like, absolutely, yes, give it to me. Put it in my inbox right now. I want it. So it was this weird sort of, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it kind of path that I was following to get there. And it's just the idea that went out in that time. Other ideas went out in other times.
Sometimes the path is a wild one because like this book started out like you said as a romance. You were thinking it was a gothic romance, and it has been described as a historic gothic thriller. And you know that when I went to the bookstore and was looking for the book after it came out, it was shelved in thrillers. But here
Mm-hmm.
you are nominated for a Stoker Award, which is from the Horror Writers Association. So you have this chameleon of a book. How does that benefit you, do you think, as a writer, as a storyteller, to have this book that sort of fits into, in some ways, all of these categories?
So I think I just tell the stories I tell, and I think that there is some overlap between like all these things. Like I have pretty publicly talked about the relationship between romance and horror specifically, right? Like I've publicly posted about that. I'm a big fan. We are sisters, you and I, and I think that there's a lot of overlap between thriller and horror, of course. But I mean, most people would agree with that, right? Like most people would be like, oh, of course. But I think what it does for me as an author, because like the stories I write are the stories I write, but I think kind of leg up it gives me is the readership, because I've written this book that can go many different ways. And I can say, like, hey, like, if you like X, like, if you are a thriller reader and you like thrillers, then you'll be okay with my book. Like, yeah, it's a horror novel, but like, it has these elements that you like. Or if you like fairy tales and fantasy, like, you'd probably also like my book. Yes, it's a horror novel, but it has these elements that you would probably really enjoy. Um, if you just want to support me, you'd like my book because the royalty checks go to me. But I think it helps me like get readership and like not kind of and not be pigeonholed, because like you said, I have a ton of ideas and a ton of concepts and a lot of stories I want to tell. So my debut being such a chameleon helps me in that way, because then when I come out with something that is a little different, it's almost it can lead up to people expecting like, oh, she's got a lot of different stories. She's all over the place. Somebody come get her.
I mean, what I like about it is that you never really know what you're going to get, and it's always this refreshing surprise. So, there's something that we've lost about this sense of wonder. But I always have that whenever I read one of your stories because I never know which direction it's going to go in until I start reading, and that's a lot of fun, you know. So, um, so I was curious. Um, you decided to write this book and set it in England in 1840. And I read a little bit about the reason why you chose England and why you chose 1840. But I was thinking that it would be good to touch base with on that, um, because there's there might be people listening who aren't familiar with the book and don't know the reason why you picked that setting and that time. Would you care to, explain that for readers who aren't familiar with Midnight Rooms?
Like the essential like core, like this is the thing you actually want to write about. Like I don't know if everybody writes like this, but I start from a place of this is the thing I want to write about, or this is the thing I want to create. And like for me, what I really wanted to do is I really wanted to kind of tell a story about a Black girl in a big dress. I love a big dress. I love the all the fabric and the petticoats, and I love it. It's great. Um, and so there's only so much history in which that particular aesthetic is happening, right? Like there's only a strict number of centuries in which people were dressing like that. If you go too far outside, they stop dressing like that. So I was like, okay, that's one. That's what I want to write about. Like, where do I do that? So I am acutely aware of how Blackness works historically, right? And I am also acutely aware of how readership is going to read things. Now, I am not a strict historian. I don't believe in doing research. I'm here to entertain you. I'm not here to educate you. Well, in this context. So I did not do a ton of research around what I was writing, but I did understand just simple dynamics. And I knew that if I put a Black girl in like 1700s America, this story cannot happen because, like, even if she is mixed race, even if she is lean, even if she's Mary from Sinners, okay, then that is a completely different kind of story. And I didn't want to write Mary from Sinners, so I mean, Mary from Sinners also didn't exist at that point. But I also knew that I can only bend the reader's perception so far until it breaks. And if I put a black girl in a situation that they know, like historically, like because like Americans know like 5 minutes of worth of history, but they do understand that black people were enslaved. So if I put a black person in a period of time which they understand slavery is happening, that will break the story. They will not believe anything else that happens in that story. So there's no way, except for like a strict, like a box of area. Like if I'm like, oh, they're in Louisiana, then people might. But like there's no way to kind of create this world, right? But in England in the 1840s, black people were free. They had abolished slavery. So all of these events that happen in this book with this character are possible there, and that makes it a book that people can suspend any sort of disbelief that they have because we've set it in a place, right? Because I imagine that most of my readership is probably American at the time of the book's release, and they can suspend their belief and believe in like the fantasy version of England, which this is in a lot of ways. It is a fantasy version of like what Victorian England is like. So we don't deal with the fact that there's no indoor plumbing.
Well, and you also remove Orbella from um, more of the densely populated spaces. She's taken to an estate that's quite remote. And I mean, when I was thinking about it, reading through it, I just thought about that in terms of how it made the events possible, but it also makes her situation more plausible because you've cut off kind of the, things from society impacting her story. Was that intentional?
It's very intentional. It's all intentional. Like that's isolation. She's removed from like this is the first abuse thing that he does. He really removes her completely from everything that she's ever known, anybody she's ever known, regardless of what those relationships are, right? Like regardless of her relationship with her family, regardless of any like personal friendship she's may have, whether they were good or bad, they were still hers. And now he's taken her to a place where all of her relationships, everyone she's going to meet, everyone she's going to interact with, everyone that she could potentially form any outside relationship with, is all attached to this one thing of which he intimately has knowledge and control over. Like she doesn't know anything, and she comes into the situation, and she really doesn't know anything. She knows that she is going to this estate. He's taking her to his family's estate, and she can only kind of um, see that through the view of what she understands to be family, which is her aunt, her uncle, and her cousins. So she's expecting to kind of run into like the same kind of social dynamic that she had existed in, and she doesn't suddenly, and she's got to learn how to act in that. So that removal of the familiar and placed just directly into the unfamiliar is very intentional. It is very jarring to be in that situation, and like you can never, part of your survival is just trying to get your feet back under you after you do that. And that's what I was going for in that moment, and that's why I chose to move her quickly away from where she had started at.
Now, you did an interview with Mary Terrace. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name correctly, Terrace or Taurus, from Strive Bookstore. And you mentioned not wanting a protagonist who was gutsy and tough, but rather, as you said, quote, a soft character who wasn't weak, who wasn't silly, just soft. So we have Arabella, and she is both shy and quirky, but she is also initially, she comes across as savvy because she was aware enough of what was going on in her uncle's house to make decisions in her own best interests. But of course, then she moves. at Hill Manor, she's mired in confusion, and part of that is because she's disoriented and because things are not like how she's used to. But I also wondered not just about the displacement and the differences, which I don't want to dish spoilers
No
for those who haven't
spoilers.
read it, but I wondered how her femininity added to her vulnerability when she moved.
So yeah, like I think um funny side note story before I get into the question. Mary, who interviewed me for the Indeed Introduce when the book came out, Strive Bookstore is in Minneapolis where I ended up moving. How funny is that?
Yeah,
Um,
I was
so I
thinking
just
about that when I
a
was
side
reading the
note.
interview. So
Yes, that's so funny. Actually, I went to their old location. They're moving locations. Um, but yeah, so back to the question. Yes, I did write an intentionally soft character. I was looking for someone who, like, when I was creating Orabella, I was really looking to create someone who was not necessarily like more clever, but someone who understood that like sometimes you have to play along to get along and you have to make these choices that are more about protecting yourself in a way that may seem like cowardly and weakness, but you're kind of just biding your time. And even that like understanding of the social dynamics that she does, which she does stutter on in her uncle's home, and she's aware that she is not always perfect in this presentation, but she knows enough to know how to kind of work around the system that she's in. You see that even with her disorientation in Cornhill Manor, when she's interacting with other people. Like once she starts understanding what she's supposed to be doing and how these things work, she starts to react to them in a way befitting of the role that she is supposed to be in. Even though she still makes mistakes, because that's an unhinged place that you just gotta survive. But I think her femininity plays a lot into the character dynamics because it's really scary to be a girl, right? And whether you're a black girl living in white space or you're a neurodivergent person living in neurotypical space, um, it's scary. Like you're always sort of in danger. And I like it's this weird dichotomy, right? Because yeah, she's in danger. Like that is very clear to anyone who like no one is reading this like, I don't know, she looks like she's okay. She probably be fine. Like, right? Like no one is getting that impression. At least I hope not. In which case, blink twice, girl, are you okay? Um, but but there's also this sense of like she's something that needs to be protected, that needs to be cared for, right? And I think that is a dynamic that only happens when you exist in a femme presenting body, because I think if Orabella was like a boy, right, if they were like we're bringing in this young strapping male, like that would be a completely different story. They would be unlikely that they would be like, this is your perfect gilded cage we're going to put you in. This is your room made perfectly for you. Don't ever leave. I'm locking this door. Like that's not the story that would be told. So I think this is um her femininity and like also how she is socialized and how she is expected to move in this world. She only has very limited spaces that she can say that she can push back on the things that are happening to her, and only limited ways that she can push back on those, and limited ways that she can gain favor. And it's played out throughout the story, like she can't tell Elias like I don't really like this and I don't want to do this, but she can tell Miss Locke that because she's a lady in the household and Miss Locke is a servant. So she can say that to Miss Locke and that can follow up the lines. Or she can say, I want to fix up the garden. And that's a way for her to have power and some sort of dynamicism inside of this household structure. But she can't be like, I demand that you fix the stairs. That's not within her privy. So yeah, that's how I believe that's that all works. It creates the society that she exists in.
Yeah, I think women, even today, to a certain extent, we are vulnerable because of the patriarchy. I mean, it's never questioned when a man makes a decision and says this is the way it's going to be. It's not questioned in the same way that it would be if it's a woman, and especially in that time period, she's trapped in more ways than one, which rapidly becomes evident as you're reading her story. So I wondered what because you started out with this gothic romance idea. What is it about a haunted house setting that you find appealing?
I think everybody finds haunted houses appealing. Like first off, so first and foremost, I think houses are really interesting because we kind of haunt our own spaces, but then they are also are these sorts of living symbols for like what has been before and the way that okay, so backing up years ago, many moons, I did an interview where someone asked me about what my stories were about, and they are about inheritance, right? So it is about like the things that we inherit either through blood, like this is um, genetic, right? Or through like just this is now my problem. And I write a lot about houses, right? Like a lot of stories. I don't like landlords. So, and like one of the examples I used when I was trying to explain this was if you move into a new house and there's a leaky faucet, like that's not your fault. That's not something you planned on. You have nothing to do with that. You've been here for 3 hours, but it's still your problem to deal with, right? You have inherited that problem from the people who lived there before, the person who owns the house, whoever. This is now your problem, right? And that is a lot of why I think haunted houses are just so fascinating because it's a ghost, but like what is a ghost but now your problem to deal with? This is a memory, this is a specter, this is not a thing that can interact with you and your life in like a physical sense, but whatever they left behind, these are things that affect you. So, and I think that's what the haunted house becomes. That's why the haunted house becomes such an obsession, because even if we want to go, I don't want to deal with this, you live there. Like you have to deal with this. And going back to the book, of course, Orabella, this is none of Orabella's problems, but like that junk and garbage and old furniture in the room full of musty clothes, those are all of her inheritance. She's dealing with all of the problems and the horror and the terror from however many years of this unhinged family. And I think that too feeds back into like just like haunted houses and ghosts, because you were inheriting in the very walls and the very floorboards and the pipes and the electric. You were inheriting however many years of horror and terror and trauma from all of these people. It is literally bleeding from the walls.
Well, and I suppose we should say, maybe we should have mentioned it earlier that your computer is haunted, and that's why there's occasional beeps.
It is, it is haunted with all my beloved friends.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I find it interesting when you step into a house. It's funny because you want to create this sense of order, and we're used to certain things like hallways, rooms, what have you, right? Like, and rooms with specific purposes. But you've created this house that is like chaos theory. It's like this
It is.
complete mystery, and it keeps her disoriented. And there go your tech ghosts again. But yeah, it was like it's fascinating, but it's also an interesting parallel because, obviously this family has created their own legacy, and they're trying to impose this upon Arabella, and the question is whether that's a good thing or bad thing, and how that's going to play out. Avoiding spoilers. So
Yes, no spoilers. No spoilers.
yeah, I think it's, I mean, occasionally there's things where you can say something about a book that happens in it and it won't really ruin it. But this is one of those books where you should really just go in cold, I think, personally. It's such a journey, and it's just amplified by not knowing very much about it. So, so I wondered, obviously, writers, we tend to give little attributes of ourselves, pieces of ourselves to our characters. How is Orabella most like you?
So we are both ADHD baddies. And it's funny because I honestly didn't know that's what I was doing when I was writing this character, because I did not know that I was an ADHD baddie when I started writing this character. But after I sold the book and I was coming back in edits, I realized what had happened in the narrative. So, like, I definitely encode in my characters, and now I see it, right? Like now, now I look at these things and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Uh huh. It's the mental illness. So I definitely see where I'm doing that. I can't help it as who I am as a person. So I think we are both like those. Like we both have that. I think that where we differ though is I think that she is a lot braver than I would be, because I would have definitely given up on all of that. Just definitely, I would have been like, absolutely not. Especially at like 26, right? She's like 26 in the narrative. I was a different person at 26. Right? I'm older now. I'm like, eh. But I think that's where our sort of alignment is around that neurodivergence. But then how we respond to different things is different. Um, and like she kind of handles everything with a lot of grace. These horrible things are happening. They are all very confusing. And like one of the early scenes, no spoilers because this is like an early scene, y'all. You like it's in the first 20% of the book. But there, the scene at the dinner where she first meets the family during the wedding dinner. And the family gives her that gift, right? They give her that horrible, horrible gift. And then, yes, she is drugged in that scene, but she takes it with such grace. She's like, "Oh, okay, thank you so much. Wow, so thoughtful. Kill me now." Like she handles these things like in a very calm manner, and I would have crashed out, right? Like I absolutely would have completely lost my mind at the 30% mark of what happens to this woman. So she is very she's very graceful and thoughtful and like measured in her responses. And I think that's like where we really differ. But I also think that that's how she's able to survive so long in this situation, is because she is graceful and thoughtful and really measured. And other people see that, Hastings sees that in her and is like, keep your head about you, girl. Um, y'all don't know who Hastings is because you haven't read the book yet, but when you do, you'll know. So, yeah, I think that's kind of our the same different thing. I definitely would have crashed out though. I would have been screaming. I could not have handled half of this though.
Yeah, she's got way more grace than I do. I would have been like, what the? Yeah, yeah.
I'm not taking that. No, I wouldn't have lasted. The first night, I would not have lasted.
I mean, I say that, but then I think about the fact that I am a coward. And so if I was in that time period and the way that women were socially conditioned, I don't know, and that's the scary part of it is like you find yourself wondering like, would I have had the guts to do what she ultimately does in her situation and to handle things the way that she handles it. So, that's kind of like the fun of like sort of speculating about, if I was in her shoes, but thank goodness I'm not.
Yeah, same. Like I said, I would have crashed out.
So I know that you're also an artist, and I wondered how being an artist influences you when you're writing.
A lot of people ask about this. And like honestly, before the book came out and I started doing kind of the interview circuit, right? I never thought about it. And then like after I started getting the question a lot, I realized I was like, oh, there's not a whole lot of people who do both of these things and aren't comic book creators, right? Like most people who write and do art, like they go into comics, and I love comics. So this isn't like a this isn't like any sort of like this one's better. Like no, like I'm just realizing that like of course people are asking me this all the time. This is weird. This is unusual. Most people don't do this as prolifically as I do this. And the answer is I don't think that the two things really greatly interact very often. I don't think that I'm activating the same parts of my creative brain when I'm doing one or the other. Um, in a general sense. Um, so I don't like I do so what I do know is if I don't do one or the other for a long time, right? If I don't do art for a long time or if I don't do writing for a long time, then I start getting weird. So both of these things are really important as a creative outlet, but they're both important differently. So I don't think they interact. Like I don't have that drive, and this is probably why it's taking me so long to like do a comic. I don't have that drive to be like, oh, I need to draw this story, right? Or if I make a painting, I don't have that drive to be like, I need to write the story down. Like these things are not connected in that way, if that makes sense.
That's the thing is like everybody's brain works differently. So, I mean, I personally I feel like I would love it if I had the artistic ability that you have so that I could make art of things that I'm writing, but I can completely understand this idea too of like they're like they're like flipping different switches. And like because I have
Kind
the
of, yeah.
ADHD with hyperfocus, when I'm writing, right? And it's probably,
I'm a hyper focused girly too, so
yeah, it's the same thing.
and I do like I used to before I was medicated. I used to like sit down in front of a canvas and like paint for 8 hours. I would eat, use the bathroom. I barely drink water. I'd just be painting for like 8 hours, and then be like, "Why do I feel so awful?" you know.
Yep, that's very familiar. Yep. As because we would do writing sprints together, right? Like, I
Yeah,
mean, we have a history, so you're aware, like, Brian will just like make me food and bring it in if he's home because he knows I'll forget to eat. Like,
exactly.
that's,
You were busy.
yeah, that's the way that the brain goes. So, but like, I was wondering though, does it help you? Like, did you get asked for ideas when it came time for the cover design? Like, does it help you
Oh
visualize
yeah.
in that respect?
Yeah, so one, yes. Yes. Yeah, okay. Let's talk about this. I love talking about this particular aspect. I love talking about art, y'all. Yes. It did. But it did a couple of things because I'm already an artist, right? So it means that I do actually have an eye for things like composition and color theory. But it also means I know how to talk about art. And I know when I look at another cover, I know what I'm looking at, right? Like I can say I like this cover because XYZ, right? Um, like some fun stories. I had a friend who was trying to figure out a cover, and she was talking to me about it, and she said, "I want like one of those like manga anime covers. Like I want it to look like a webtoon." And I was like, "Oh, like this." And I pulled up some images, and then she was like, "No, more like this." And she pulled up a couple covers. She was looking like this was just normal. Like I call them clip art covers, like so the romance novels that you see that have kind of like they look kind of like stock images, like illustrated stock images. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. And I was like, that's not webtoon at all. Like, what are you talking? But she didn't have the language because she just didn't have the language to explain the kind of style she was looking for. So she just reached for the closest thing. Um, and I was like, baby, you could just say clip art, it's fine. But because I know what I'm looking at, I'm able to go, here are images that I think would really exemplify like what I'm looking for in a cover. And actually when we did Midnight Rooms, so I had two rounds of cover discussions about Midnight Rooms. When my book was first purchased, it was on a faster timeline. And so like right after I started right after I signed my book, I had a conversation about covers at that point in time. Right, my first book. I don't know anything. This is my first time at the rodeo. It's a whirlwind because it's literally happening. I think within 4 months of like signing, it was a whole thing. But then, as you know, the book was delayed for various reasons that had nothing to do with me. um, so then I had, and in that time, I also changed editors. So, which is a common thing that happens in publishing. If you are listening and you're like, oh, you get an editor and that's forever. No, it's not forever. You will change editors a lot. Um, so I had a different editor in that time. So I then had the same like had the same conversation about covers like 2 years later. Like it had been like a significant chunk of time. Um, and so at that time, you know, I'm further into my career. I'm a lot more confident about my vision and like talking to people. I understand at that point that I'm the talent, right? Because when you first sign a book, you're kind of like, oh my God, I'm just happy to be here, right? Which is a feeling that you can have, and that is fair. But then, like, after you're over that starstruck stage of, oh my God, I made it, then you're like, wait, I'm the big deal, right? Like, this is my book. Um, so. So we end up having, you know, another conversation. And what I said to the art director, I sent like, first off, I sent like a dissertation, right? It was a long email. It was a very long email about what I wanted and why I wanted it, and like an idea. And I did send like a kind of a sketchy idea for like the image that I wanted to see on the cover, or like an idea for a kind of image I wanted to see on the cover with the symbols that I wanted to see in that image. Um, and then the art I sent. So your editor, when you're doing the cover, your editor sends to you and the art director some like images that they think would work, right? And then you send what you think will work. And so my editor had a couple of different book covers. They were nice book covers. And I sent art. Like I sent actual paintings. And I said, this is this is what I want to see. And we actually I think we had 2 emails between me and the art director at that point. And the first one, I was like, they sent me an artist and they were like, how about this person? And I was like, okay, well, they're lovely. I really like their work. It's beautiful. So don't take this as any remark against the work that this person has done. But this is why this is bad. And it was like this long email. And I think at that point, the art director was like, all right, like this is serious. And then they sent over another email that had like 7 different artists in it. And like I had a top 3, right? Like I definitely had 3 that I was like, these are 3 I want. But one of them was, of course, the artist that did my book was Marco Mazzani, and I was like, he could do whatever he wants. So like after all of these long emails, I was like, he can do whatever he wants. Whatever he decides as the cover, that's the cover. Okay, he's in charge. If you can get him whatever he draws is fine.
And for those who are
And
watching,
that's what he did.
I'm holding up a copy of Midnight Rooms to see the cover. I don't know technically as much about art, so I look at this and it feels watercolor type of style to me. Like it's more of a pastels. Like it's I don't really know how to put it, but it's distinct. And of course,
He's a colored pencil artist. That's colored pencil.
Wow. Okay. Wow. And and of course, if you read the book, then you'll get all the imagery. This is actually the special edition version of your book. I have 3 copies of your book, right? Because Status Fiction put this out in a book box and did a beautiful job with the sprayed edges. But like, yeah, the art is like, you know, it really sets this tone, and it sets the book apart because like whenever I look at it, it's not like anything else on my shelves.
I also, when I got so when I was like planning, like I had basically one big request that was like non-negotiable, right? And that was that Arabella's face be on the cover. It was that you see her because um historically what you see in a lot of books that feature Black people is we are either like our faces are not on the cover, right? Like you don't see our faces like with features, okay, like eyes and nose and lips, like you don't see that. Like we are faceless, we are this kind of um idea of a person on the cover, or we are not featured on the cover at all. Like then, you're getting especially in speculative genres, you're getting like landscapes and foliage and animals, are like symbols that appear inside the book, like things like that. And it's a way for um it's a marketing kind of tactic, because it's a way to kind of trick people who do not share that same ethnicity to pick up the book, because books by people of color have this it's not a reputation, but like there's this idea that's kind of ingrained in us, that books about people of color are only for people of color, um, which is not true, because anyone can enjoy a woman running through an old decrepit manor having a bad time. That's a story for everyone. So like they do this to get more sales, and like I get it, that's fine. I love more sales, but for me it was really important that the consumer, the reader, the person who's going to pick, they know like this is a Black woman. I need you to remember that she's Black. And I think also having such a beautiful cover, because it's full of whimsy, like dark whimsy, obviously, but like she looks like she could be a Cinderella princess. She looks like she could be walking out of a Disney fairy tale, one that clearly has gone terribly wrong, but it it's there. It's a fairy tale. It's happening. Um,
It's
so
not your
that was really
usual
important.
Disney princess.
Not your mama's Disney princess.
No.
Um, but so that was really important to me, to have that kind of representation with my book cover, and he did a great job. It's so beautiful.
Right. Fantastic job. Well, and, how do we change the landscape in publishing unless we start making actual changes? And that includes cover
Exactly.
art, right? Like, and I don't know. I just, to me, I just, of course, it doesn't make any difference in the sense that it's certainly not going to deter me. I mean, to me, I'm like, oh, this looks original, unique, refreshing, not the same old, same old.
I think about it and I was like, man, if I was getting this book published in like the 80s or 70s, right? Now, on the one hand, I would have had a peekaboo cover, and that would have been cool. That would have been dope. Peekaboo cover, that would be, I would love that. So, but on the second hand, I was thinking, I was like, this book, I could envision the cover I would have got in like 1975. It would have had Clarissa on the cover. That's who would have been on the cover, right? So it would have been the peekaboo cover, and you would have had like the little her face. So it would be a beautiful woman, blue eyes, blonde hair, and you open it and it would be like Hastings standing next to her looking like a corpse. And it would be like, oh my God, this is so gothic and scary. And then you would be reading it and it'd be like this other secondary woman. You'd be confused. You'd be like, she has black hair. What is this? who are these people on the cover? And you get to that scene, you're like, oh, okay. But it would have been Clarissa on the cover. Like you would have never seen Orbella in that context.
which is
And
like,
so
yeah, it's tragic though because Orbella is beautiful. I mean, if you are watching on YouTube, then you can see this cover. It is gorgeous. It's a stunning cover. She's beautiful, and she's a very memorable character. So I really hope that people, I hope when the paperback's out that even more people pick it up and enjoy it.
yes,
So,
I am really hopeful that the paperback, like people come in and start picking up the paperback. I know some people like wait for the paperback to come out. I don't, like I'm a hardcover girly. Um, but I know some people prefer it.
yeah, you know what it is? Well, or at least this is how I've begun to understand it. I've got carpal tunnel in both hands, and I'm a hardcover girly, but there are some days holding the hardcover is is painful. And so some people, for all kinds of reasons, prefer the paperback. And I would imagine comfort's one of them. So, anyways, whatever their reasons, the paperback's coming soon. So that's
Coming soon. It's there for you.
or maybe by the time this runs, it'll already be out. I think I've got you scheduled actually for the day after release. Yeah, I've got you scheduled for June 11th. So that's right. It comes
Oh,
out.
perfect.
Yeah. So
Perfect.
heck, if I look at my notes, I would know these things. Right. So let's try to wrap this up with something a little offbeat and wild. So see if you can follow me here. So if you could pick any book, does not have to be your book, but any book and have a video game made of that book so that you could be one of the characters in that book. What book? What character?
Oh man. Oh man, that's hard. Because it like changes the dynamics of how you're thinking about like your reading experience.
Yep.
Um, ooh, so obviously not my book. That would be. I mean, I don't know because I think like because I was gonna say that would not be, but then I started thinking about it and I was like, okay, maybe though, because like I've played a lot of horror games from the '90s, and like I think that the Resident Evil guys can do it. Like they could. I think we could do this. The people who made Rule of Rose, like they could certainly do it. We can get a second round from them. I should call them. So okay, so establishing that my book would probably make a nice horror novel, especially if we're doing or a nice horror game, especially if we're doing some sort of like point and click. Um, a book that I don't know because I don't read a lot of like books that are like a whole lot of like action packed kind of stuff. So like a lot of my stuff is like psychological, right? So people are being horrified internally. They're having a bad time in their brains. They're dealing with some terrible thing their parent did to them. They're not like out here fighting ghosties. So I don't know. I don't know. I just don't know.
Something to ponder. I mean, I love psychological stories, and I think they actually can make an interesting game because there's a lot of complexities to the decisions the characters have to make. And when your mind is trying to unravel what's going on, or whether, like, I mean, I've read books where it's kind of like, is this real or is this not real? Right? I mean, and there's some of that
Yeah.
going on in Midnight Rooms as well, of like trying, as you said earlier, trying to get your feet under you and figure out what's going on so you feel grounded. And of course,
Right. And I think like the games, like I mean, especially that's why I was like, I played '90s horror games because like a lot of those games, like oh my god, like do you know about? Have you ever heard of the game Parasite Eve?
no, I don't think so.
Okay, so it's this game that came out in the '90s. People who play games are like, oh my god, yes, Parasite Eve. It is beloved. It is about this opera. It's about this cop basically, but there's this virus that's like mutating people. That this opera singer is spreading. But it's based on a book. It's based on a Japanese novel, and Parasite Eve. It's a very slow novel. And the parasite is like, it comes from a kidney transplant. It's like a mutated kidney transplant.
Ooh, that sounds
So
cool.
like, it was, but like that they made a game from that. So
Hey, you know what? Like, I mean, my husband watches a lot of Asian films and reads a lot of manga and yeah. So, it's incredible to me sometimes when we watch some of the shows, like the way that just this one thing that seems so offbeat or whatever turns into this whole great story and it's refreshing and unique and so I'm down
I
for that.
love
I
it.
mean, you know, so like to be able to come up with a game for that, that's great. But also it could be really wild. So,
I'm gonna have my agent try to option my my book for great game scripts.
yeah, now you can try to have a video game come out of your book. That would be awesome, though. Can you
That
imagine?
would be awesome. Like Midnight Rooms, the game.
Yeah, no, a whole new way to experience it. Actually, and I could also see it as a board game, kind of, you know, like a
Oh, that
Clue-esque,
would be fun.
like, but anyways, I digress. So to wrap things up, you have the Sunken and the Adored. Let me try that again. You have the Sunken, the Adored, and What Kills You, two novels that are under contract with Amistad. So
Mm-hmm.
tease us up for what's next. I don't know if either of them's coming out next year or which one's up first or anything.
So the Sunken the Adored is up next. That is another gothic horror novel. This one takes place in 1700s Venice. So it takes place before Midnight Rooms in a completely different country. But keen, observant readers may notice some things, that make them think of the first book. No spoilers, no spoilers. But that one is about a woman who is traveling to Venice. She has a camera, and this is where we get back into like my feelings about research in like linear time, and how I don't believe in it, because cameras weren't invented then. But I'm doing what I want. So she is hired um, to take pictures of this kind of uh, house of pleasure who is having all of these guests over the season, the hot summer season, and people start dying. Lots of people start dying. Um, and so that is that book. That one is coming out. It's slated currently to come out in summer of 2026. So next summer it's slated for release. What I do know, in case anybody cares, is I'm getting the same cover artist.
Oh, fantastic.
So that's fun. I'm very excited about that. Um, and then What Kills You would probably be coming out the next year. And that one is going to be my contemporary horror debut. It is about a family that moves into what they think is going to be their dream house. And everything starts going wrong around their ears. And it's how the matriarch of that family deals with that and comes to terms with what that means in her life. And it's also about trauma because it's a haunted house book. And haunted houses are about trauma. Bringing that back around. So those two books, I am in the upcoming anthology with Johnny Compton's the editor, and I apologize because I cannot remember the title. Oh, Where the Devil Walks. My brain was like, Devil Kills Devils, because that's his book. So it was like devil, and that's all I could come up with. ADHD, folks. But I'm in that upcoming anthology. I'm submitting a story for that. And I also recently wrote a essay for a collection about motherhood in horror movies. that's coming out with from Bloomsbury, and I am so bad with titles today. Dan Alston's the editor, though. I don't know what's going on with my brain in titles today. But I am also I've got an essay coming out with that, and I don't know when those two projects are coming out off the top of my head. But be on the lookout.
Things to look forward to. Well, and also what you were saying about your historic novel, The Sunken, the Adored. I mean, we're just saying that cameras weren't invented in the 1700s because nobody wrote that down or documented it. I mean, we all know that the recording of history is quite skewed in favor of
um,
people with certain complexions from certain parts of the world. So who knows?
little mini spoiler, that concept is actually part of the story, in which I am kind of dealing with themes of not forgotten history, but erased history and how it impacts, especially like marginalized groups or groups that have been marginalized, which this person and her beloved friends all exist under that flag. Um, so the camera is this bit of like technology that's also a little bit of magic, but it is also about documenting things that are happening, and like our living memory, and how to live when all your friends are dying. Like, so it is a book. I'm very excited for it. It's very near and dear to my heart. I hope it horrifies people and makes them cry.
Well, on that note, I hope it inspires people and makes them cry. Thank you so much for that sentiment. And knowing that you're writing, it probably will. Oh,
Oh, thanks.
well, thank you so much for chatting today. Congratulations again on the Stoker nomination. Super excited for your next book.
Thank you. Thank you. It was lovely being here. Thank you.